Good evening. Welcome to the Really Love Guitars setup department. And here we have Graham's Faith guitar. Now I've said Faith Venus, but this is a Mars Sunburst, which I think means sunburst, judging by the colour, the finish. Anyway, it's a Faith acoustic, electroacoustic. I believe it's got the business at the end here. Oh no, it's not electro. It's I thought it had a jack socket. It's a regular, and it's down for a bit of setup. And in particular, we're going to lower the action, and let's take you a little fly through. Faith, a very old, sort of discoloured tusk nut there. I'm going to replace that with a new one, and I'm going to clean this up while we also adjust the saddle. Now, the funny old thing that you get into with acoustic guitars is, I'm not a luthier first and foremost, okay? I know critics will go, haha, we knew that, but I'm a interested, relatively curious guitar fixie tech type person, right? And or you also have learned some stuff about the basics of what makes guitars play in a way that seems to keep a large number of my customers happy. So I think, I shouldn't have to say it, but often I do find myself having to say something like, it's fine that you can disagree and you have a sort of, perhaps you were taught a different way or you have a better way or whatever that works for you. That's great. But I do encourage people where they disagree to do so with respect for the diversity that all of us have in different ways of doing things, okay? And even if you're sure you're righter and smarter than me, try to do it in a way that will build bridges between us, not create conflict and division, okay? That might sound like a hard task for some people, but it's what we need to do more of in the world, and I request that of you. Now, with this in mind, acoustic guitars are funny creatures, and what I've learned in the time I've been working on them is that they're all fighting against what is essentially 24 hours a day, very heavy loading of these strings, so maybe 200 or so pounds of string loading, or maybe 150 upwards, and 12 strings, 250, I can't remember, I read it somewhere. But a lot of loading constantly, and of course these things are made of wood, and despite being cleverly braced on the inside and so on, they're always under load. While you sleep, they are being distorted or loaded and bent out of shape. And eventually things happen, like the action gets higher. So the question is, when somebody sends or brings an acoustic, there's a couple of things I need to check beforehand with them to see whether what I can do, or see whether or not I can make useful changes, or I can do anything useful. So, for example, on a guitar like this, nice quality guitar, inside the back here, you've got neck bolts holding this neck on, but this is glued down, if I'm not mistaken. And so the inverted commas correct way to fix put this another way. Okay, when you get a guitar, it should be built in such a way that the way that the neck is fixed to the body of the guitar, which hopefully keeps its box shape throughout its life, this thing gets fixed in a certain way that between the position of the nut, the alignment of the fingerboard, and the position of the bridge over here should deliver the strings to the bridge at a usable height above the frets. And of course that's all to do with this angle here, the angle formed by this heel and this little bit here. So you can see that, if you look closely actually, you can see that on a guitar like this, there's actually no angle at all there. It's as near as flat to the top of the guitar as possible. So interestingly, if you were to try and adjust the angle of this. Well, let's say something first. If you try to adjust the angle, if you want to adjust the angle on an acoustic guitar, there's the box section. Oops, sorry, just hit the camera. There's a box section. There's your bit of fingerboard, and there's your heel like that. Okay, and clearly, if this is too low now, you want to boost this upwards. So let's say you want this to go a bit more like this, to put it crudely, right? Then this has to go a bit like that, and that has to go a bit like that, very crudely, right? So you can see that in some way or other on an acoustic guitar, if you're going to correct rising action using the neck joint, you have to do quite a complicated thing with the angles, and they have to be carefully calculated so that this angle, let's say the reduction of this angle, you're taking that part off there, and the increase in this angle obviously have to be complementary. They have to work together, and then what you end up getting is the neck going down at a, or the neck is raised up to a usable height, depending on where your bridge is. So that's that's what's meant by a neck reset. And of course, before you get to that, you have to say to yourself, well, what's changing? Why after a few years has this started to become difficult to play? And why after a few years have I noticed the action rising and rising? And realistically, there's only a couple of things physically possible. So if you approach this with logic, the only way you could make that action down there rise would first of all be to raise this height down here, which means perhaps this nut is bending upwards. Look, I'm on TV, Ma. This nut is bending upwards, so maybe the whole neck is bent upwards like that into a kind of bow and arrow shape. Well, it isn't. You can see it's not particularly doing that. Ideally, you would try and control that with the truss rod adjustment, but it's not doing that so much that it's lifting this way up so that this action becomes too high. So was it to do with the bridge? Well, how is it to do with the bridge? Has the bridge physically moved? Has this got taller? Was it maybe not low enough altogether in the first place? Well, there's a combination of things that could be happening there. One is, if you look at this saddle, the original saddle is pretty high, and you can tell by how steep the break angle is on the low E. It always kind of reduces as you get a longer reach up here. But this looks pretty high, so straight out of the box, I would say that's quite a tall saddle. Nothing wrong with that if it plays okay, but you can see down here we've got an action that's quite high. And it's higher than I like it, and it's certainly higher than my customer likes it. So you got this question, and people have different answers. So people say, well, how come this has increased over the years? Let's say it didn't come out of the shop like this. How come it's got higher? Well, mainly this has got higher because one of two things is happening. Either the bridge is rising up slowly relative to this whole neck body arrangement, or it could be possible that this thing is folding up a little bit into the body here, like this, and the whole angle between this plane, hard to show you in this plane here and this plane here on the neck could have changed slightly. So whereas once it was sort of this plus this, let's say, now it may have turned into this plus this. It's slightly different, do you see what I mean? And then what you get is, okay, here you've got, a nice workable angle between nut and saddle, but here you've got something that now looks more like that. It's exaggerated, but you get what I'm saying. So it's quite likely that something is either folding up over time in terms of the basic geometry, or it could be that the bridge is rising. Now, if you think about the construction of these things, both things are technically likely to happen over time because of the loading. These strings are pulling horizontally, right? And what they want to do is they want to compress this headstock into the neck. Now the neck has certain stability, and it does compress a little bit, but not so much you'd see it. But everything's pulling this way. Now I know from making bolt-on neck guitars, and you probably know from fitting them and taking the necks off, that if it can't squash, if it can't compress this way, the next thing it's going to try and do is trying to go up, because these strings want to take their least resistance to relieve the load. So basic physics tells you if it can't compress it longitudinally, which is quite hard to do because of the solid neck material, it's then going to try and pull it upwards like this. So that's always a loading going on, which could quite easily give you a little bit of that effect. But the other thing about this is this end here is trying to pull that towards it longitudinally. And if it can't pull it longitudinally, what's it going to do? Well, it's going to try and pull this end up, right? It's a secondary sort of force. I mean, it's trying to pull that way, but if it can't pull that way, it will try and pull that way. And what you get, often you get, is this back of the guitar starts to rise up like this under loading. Imagine pulling a bedspread like this, laid out, made fairly tight, and then you pull on it, you attach something to it and you pull, it's gonna bunch up if it can. And if it has to distort to do that, sometimes it will do that. So it's the biggest battle you've got is the forces pulling on the guitar the whole time. And of course, as you know, they're designed over decades, nearly maybe 100 years of design now to counteract that force. But you have to ask yourself, do you remember when the guitars used to be fitted to a whatever that thing was called there, the string, heck, I've forgotten I can never remember the word for this. There was a thing that attached to the back end of the guitar, maybe it was screwed into here, but there's a block right here, and so they put the fantail thing on there, the strings fitted to there, so all the horizontal or longitudinal loading was taken against this, well, mostly against this block, which is by definition strong, and it's in that plane. The only force at the bridge was downward, okay, because the strings were pushing down, but the longitudinal force was held by this solid structure here, which is a much less flexible part than dragging the top in that direction. So in a way, what obviously is the case in acoustic guitars, I mean, this isn't from luthier school, this is just sort of worked out from common sense. The obvious thing about this is that the glue on bridge is a compromise between the best sound producing technology versus the ultimate kind of distortion of the guitar, is I guess what I'd call it. So it's not the best from the strength point of view, but it's the best from the apparently the best from the tone point of view. Although I quite like old arch tops as well, but they have a different kind. They don't play with this modern, acoustic resonance. So what they want here is the thinnest possible top, braced on the inside with the least encumbrance and the most direct transmission of vibrations through to this top. And you can hear it, or you can hear it from my microphone. You can hear it, how lovely it is when it resonates. So it's a compromise, and the loading eventually wins. And when the loading eventually wins over dozens of years, you get into that sort of position, or actually you get to that sort of position when the geometry is what I call folding up, and then somebody has to do that to it, and that's a 500 or 600 quid job on most guitars, particularly where the neck is glued. Where the neck is bolted, it's still a tricky job, because you either have to make or use commercial shims. I don't know if Faith makes them for this guitar, but like I said, the slight difficulty here is how often there's a little bit of room for manoeuvre, but here if you're going to bend this up, this end has to rise, so there have to be some sort of shimming under there, and then you have to remove some from this to make it work. Or you could, I don't really think there's any other way of doing it. So one side has to increase, and one side has to move inwards, the other side has to move upwards to make it work. Some guitars, like Taylor's, have ready-made shims from the factory that you can get. They're not very keen to sell them or give them away to regular people, they much prefer, obviously, to have official service centres do them, people trained on the tailor stuff. But, you know, they are doable if you're keen, and if you persuade them to send them to you, you can do it on your tailors. But again, you also have to go in there, unbolt. My tailor baby has 2 bolts, 2 screws there. In fact, that's all it takes. It doesn't have this heel. It just sits on like a normal bolt-on neck. So coming back to the beginning, when you get a guitar like this, often if you buy a guitar from new, or budget guitar from new, you may find that it begins by being too high for your liking at both ends. So it might have too high a first fret action, which is kind of evidenced by a big space. This isn't bad at all, but on your guitar you might find that out the shop it comes with a huge high first fret action, which makes it really difficult to play here, tiring, but also it makes the notes pressed here near the nut on the particularly well, it makes these notes go sharp when you fret them down here, and that typically makes the open chords sound awful, because some of the notes in the open chord will be pressed and therefore be going sharp, and some of them will be won't be fretted. They'll be open strings and they'll be in tune with each other and not in tune with the fretted ones. So it makes open chords sound terrible. So often straight out of the shop you'll want to correct that, whether you do it by cutting the nut slots or replacing it with a nut. But either which way, like we're going to do today, is replace it with this nut, but it's still going to have to be cut absolutely precisely so that when we place it on the nut shelf it's at exactly the right height. I don't want to be cutting into the nut slots. The whole point of using tusk from the factory is, in my book, is avoiding at all costs cutting. Now, it's not the end of the world. I've done millions of guitars. I haven't got one here right now. I've done millions of guitars where you have to cut the nut slots. Either somebody doesn't want the nut changing expressly and you have to work with what you've got, or it's lacquered in so beautifully that somebody doesn't want to take it out because it will spoil the originality, or you've had to make a custom one from a block, right? In all those cases you have to cut it, and you can do it as carefully as you can with either these sorts of files, or where's my other pile of files? Oh yeah, another pile of Hiroshima files all sat there in a little container. Can you see them? Either which way you can do it, and they play fine, you know, they'll stay in tune. I just like to go for the absolute best of all worlds, which is the untouched factory made slots, without any, you know, so look at them when you see them up close, there's no raggedness at all. And then you look at this end and you'll say, wow, this is really high. Now it could be straight out the shop, they've chucked in a really tall saddle. Very often they'll do that, and it will give you a default high action. Now this on this guitar currently is 3.25 millimeters here. I measure at the last fret. Don't get hung up about that. Other people measure at the 12th fret. I personally like to measure at the last fret because I know, you know, it works for how I do it. It's not the right or the wrong way. So I measure 3.25 here. That's quite high. I know from experience that you can go down to at least as low as 2 millimeters, have a great playing guitar and easy action at both ends. And that's what Graham wants with this. So the question comes is, if you get your, let's say this is brand new out of the shop and it comes with badly set nut slots and a high playing action at that end, but you've got a tall saddle. Well, you go in the forums and everyone will say, oh no, don't ever, I mean, you look at Taylor's website would tell you, don't adjust the action ever by reducing the saddle, right? They will say that the only way you should ever change the action is by using their shim system. Now that could be, I'll be cynical, that could be because they want to sell you their shim sets, okay? Or they want you to take it to a Taylor approved technician, okay? But it also could be that they believe that's the correct way. Now, if that was the case, that they believe that it's mechanically the most correct way of doing it, it then follows that there must be an assumption that taking this down in any way is bad for the sound. Now, that assumption then brings in a hypothesis, a slightly unstated one, right, that says optimum sound is produced by this guitar when the saddle is exactly this tall and has this amount of material in it, pressing on maybe the piezo strip or whatever, or not, just pressing onto the bottom of the slot. Now, I think that's a bit fatuous, that idea that this can only transmit vibrations if this thing here is a fixed size. I can't see any argument for why that would be the case. Now, this is how my brain works. So I go, well, if there's no argument I've ever seen or heard or can find that makes a coherent case. Now, all of you clever people will go, but if you take that too far down, you'll lose the brake angle. Yes, you can lose the brake angle, and then that will have an impact on the, if you like, the pressure. Now, you might say, well, then this height and these angles, by definition, produce a certain physical force down on the top of the guitar, and you'd be quite right to argue that. Now, the question is whether taking that down reduces the volume or tone of the guitar appreciably. Now, presumably, I haven't heard the Taylor people say, but presumably they might argue that is the case. Okay, in which case they would say, I mean, we're talking about Faith here, but Taylor people with their easy on, easy off, inverted commas, neck, they would say, don't ever adjust your action other than by readjusting the entire neck alignment. The whole neck geometry has to change to get you a lower action. That's a big deal. Even if you have shims, it's still quite a deal. The alternative is to work on the saddle until such times as it reduces the brake angle to what is evidently not a very usable level. Now, the question would then be, what are the advantages of doing it this way, and what's the point beyond which you can't go? I've played guitars. I've got one at home that plays very well, even with barely a degree of angle here, and you can see that on this one, that's at least 45 degrees. So this is, this argument would say, if this was exactly as Faith wanted it to come out of the factory, this argument would say this guitar plays optimally with the minimum brake angle of 45 degrees over the high E, and more like sort of 60 degrees on the low E, possibly even more if you look at it. So, there's an unspoken hypothesis in there. My experience is different from that. It says that I can barely tell the sound difference between these two, between a guitar with before this and after I do this job on it. So you step back from it, and you have critics that come in and say, "Oh, you've got to do a guitar this way. You've got to take off." In this case, it might not even have shims. In fact, you have to break the glue seal here as well. Even though there's bolts holding it on, it's clearly, I would say, it appears to be either, it might not be glued, but it's a fine fit up here. So the idea that you're going to take this neck right off using some big bolts inside there, you're going to take this neck off, and you are going to find a way. Maybe there's room in here, there's an inset, maybe you can drop the tail end in a little bit more by changing some Faith bought shims, and then you've got another one you've got to put up here. Otherwise you'll put this back together again, and then there'll be a gap which you don't want, so you've got to shim that. The idea of doing that versus 20 minutes of working on this saddle to gain the reduction here and for it still to play beautifully, knowing that if you really found that it didn't sound the way you always remember it, you can always go back to that one, just get another saddle. So, do we take this all apart and buy shims and go through the calculation to get the right shims, assuming that this isn't fixed to the top? If it's glued to the top, this will not be an easy removal thing anyway. That's quite a big job, even if it was one of the Taylors, but it isn't. It's a Faith, and I'm not even sure that's massively as easy, but even if it was, it's quite a big deal. So when people send me a guitar and they want the action improved, I do what is feasible without going into huge amounts of time and energy. And the only reason I do it is because I don't hear, and I've never had somebody tell me that there is a substantive difference between this with a couple of millimeters knocked off it and the guitar with set up as this, they still sound almost identical. Well, I've never heard it sound any different, but if you did a back-to-back, you know, I would be prepared to accept that you might hear a difference, because by definition there will be a slight difference in angle. But if that's the only thing, then you have other options. You could slot the wood here on your new lower saddle, and you can allow the strings to emerge at a steeper angle anyway. You don't have to get stuck with with changing the break angle. So there's loads of things you can do which don't involve taking the neck off and sending abroad or wherever it has to be for various shims and so forth. So that's why I do it the way I do it. Now, if you sent me this and it was flat as it can be, or pretty low, there's no adjustment room in there for whatever reason, and you hadn't got the action you want, then I would be saying to you, we're at a point where the only way to gain better action, i.e. to bring the strings down, would be to change the geometry to bring the neck up. And then we're into that territory whether we like it or not. And the question is, how much is it worth to you? If it's a guitar that's been cleverly made to make that as easy as possible, then it might be a couple of £100. If it's a guitar that's all glued and done up in the factory, and that you have to take apart and physically shim or reduce down the wood to get it to the right angle, that could be hundreds of pounds. And I've never done a neck reset, but I've studied the processes involved, and it is, even from somebody who knows what it involves to do adjustments on guitars, it looked like days of work all told. So I will aim to make a substantial improvement on these. I have seen videos of, well, I've done tailors in the past where I've done adjustments on baby tailors where I've done it purely through the saddle, because as far as I was concerned, it's the simplest way through, and there's more than enough room to do it. And yes, you get people turn up and tell you you shouldn't be doing it that way. So anyway, that's probably enough ranting. Let's just make sure we're still recording, because this thing's been a bit iffy recently. Just out of interest, here's a little 3D printed saddle that my friend Gerard has made for me. Just a trial, actually, to see whether printed saddles work. In reality, I don't think we can get thin enough, really. I mean, you don't have to obviously come down to 0. This comes down to 0.25. By the looks of it, 0.25 is its thinnest. Now, 0.25 is typically the thickest shims I tend to use on electric guitars, but this one goes from 0.25 up to 1.5. So it means the rise in here is 1.25 millimeters, not degrees, but millimeters. Now, if I were using that, that would be a very big shim lift. But the manufacturers sell their shims in terms of degrees, so they get you, if you buy them, they get you to work out how many degrees difference you need to get in your neck. But having done it the simpler way for many years, what I will do is, I mean, one of the things is this is very tall anyway, and it's kind of leaning backwards a little bit because it's so tall. So in a way, it would benefit from not standing so far out of the slot, because as soon as you're out of the slot, it bends the forces bend it in one direction or the other. Anyway, so having measured this up, what I've got is 3.25 down here, 2 on this side. So I know I can go from 2 down to 1.5. So there's a half a mil and 1.25 measured here, which in reality is more again there. It's another 0.5 again there, because it's twice the 12th fret. So it's not exactly. It's a little bit more than 1.5 times its distance. If you get its height, I should say. So 1.25 here. If I do 1.25, it'll still be do 1.25 off here. It'll still be a little bit high. Now, historically, I've tended to do that, check it, and then take a little bit more when I'm confident that it plays. Normally, I can do that without doing any fret leveling, but I know that Graham wanted some of these little grooves taken away, and actually they're quite deep down on the B. Actually, it's getting quite hammered down here. So I thought I'll do a little bit of leveling on this because he asked for it, and we'll go from there. So it's a sort of reduction. Now, by the way, one of the reasons I will change the nut on here, because even by the time I've reduced this action, these actions now are going to be very, very low. They're just about spot on as is, which is a good thing to say. They've been done well, so this would be fairly easy to play. But if I reduce the final action, or the last fret action, it's going to also reduce the first fret action, because they're interconnected, obviously. Well, we know this, don't we? Yes, we do. So I'm going to take the truss rod cover off, which apparently has 3 different kinds of screws at the moment, but that's okay. One is clearly a substitute. Now, in terms of the relief, I had a look at this earlier on, and the relief, well, that's now almost touching. The relief is pretty good. I'm not going to mess with it. One of the reasons is if the relief is about in the range that I would want, I don't mess with it because it feels, I want the guitar to end up feeling similar, only improved in action. So the curvature will make a big difference to how it feels, unless it needs reducing or increasing. In this case it doesn't. It needs a bit more room than an electric guitar to spin, so it's about 0.3 millimeters gap at the moment, something like that, and I think that's about right for an acoustic. You can go looking for recommended figures until the cows come home, and you can follow everybody else's until you know, and you can argue the toss. I say get some, right, more than none. Okay, if you can judge, as I'm used to doing, half mils and quarter of mils, then you can say pretty much what it is. It's about 0.3. That will do as a playing relief. If it doesn't feel good when I've done it, then I'll make an adjustment, and you should feel free or comfortable doing that. Now, a question that sometimes people ask is, you've got 2 interdependent things here, and you're going to physically adjust both of them, right? So first of all, I'm going to take that nut out, replace it with this one, and we're going to need to bring this down to a level. But how do we know what level? Because this has got to come down too. So when you have 2 or more things interdependent, my recommendation is that you start with the biggest of the variables, right? So for example, if I take this down by 1.25 on this side and 0.5 on that side, we're getting closer to where I want it. But then that will lower this, and you'll see quickly how this will be too low on this. Then we'll replace it, and we'll aim to bring this down to this level. We'll stop a little at all of that, because we may take this down a little bit more, in which case at the other end of the kind of triangle, this will also reduce. So it's a game of recognizing the interdependency or the interrelationship between these things. So like I said, I'm going to begin by slacking. Actually, you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to play it. Now, wouldn't it be good to have 2 sound samples? I suppose if I played a bit now and then I could bring it back in later with the miracle of editing, I could do that, couldn't I? So trouble is, when you do this, you have, well, the mic will be in the same place because it will be off this head mic. Now what's going to happen is, of course, between now and the final restringing and so on, you're going to get different new strings, different kinds of strings. Okay, creaky strap, sorry about that. So what I should do is just play 2 or 3 chords, simple sequence. remember that one. That's Final Cut, Pink Floyd song. Okay, so a few chords played with the metal pick, which I'll chuck over there, and I'll come back and nick that sound sample later on, ho ho ho, and we'll see if we can detect a difference between that and this and that. So I'm just going to try and give you a long shot to begin with. Oh, by the way, I'm going to have to whip out and do a spray can job soon. So let's get this started, and then we'll go out for a walk and do some spraying, just for an interlude. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to slack off. There's way too much string wound onto these posts, by the way, and it does matter. This will be storing up lots of detuning potential, which you could do without. So I really recommend that you follow the sort of simple electric guitar tuning thingy routine that I do, or some simple one that just minimises the amount of material that goes around the posts, because it's just there's no real need to have that much. It does get in the way. Okay, so you can see there's a little bit of wear on there. It's not the world's worst, but equally it's quite deep on the B string department. There you go. And it's kind of cosmetic. Normally I wouldn't go after that for its own sake, but Graham has asked for it, so I'm going to do it. Now what we want to do is we want to remove the thingy, the saddle, and I'm just going to sort of lift it up with my fret pulling pliers and just gently walk it sideways till we get it out. There we go. So it's a nice tall tusk thing, and look at how it's aged over the years. Now, I mean, that could be nicotine for all I know. Yeah, okay, that's interesting. So the two step back are the treble. Sorry, yes, the treble side. So I'm just going to make a mark on that just so we make sure we don't mix them up. Treble and the bass side, and I'll probably end up sawing that right off. So it would be better to do it. No, actually, I'll just write it again if I need to. Okay, so what we start with is we've got a measurement we need to work to. So we'll start with our little micro thingy. I'm going to sharpen this pencil just a tiny bit. I should have brought, maybe I did. No, I didn't. I bought some little propelling pencil-y things. That's a 0.7 mil. So it wasn't massively sharp. This will do a little bit better. Okay, so I'm going to make sure I'm at the right end, treble end, bass end. So on the bass end I'm going to go 1.25 mils. I hope you can see what I'm doing here. You can't, can you? Because I really haven't made it easy. Sorry. So I'm going to go 1.25. Now we know that's conservative because it's only at the last fret, which is about how many, 2-3 inches into the thing. It's not all the way along. So we could go, excuse me, we could go quite a lot more. But let's start with 1.25 as our start side on the bass side, and then we're going to go down to 0.5 mil on the treble side. Now this means obviously cutting in a sort of slope, really. The 0.5 mil thing, it's quite difficult to see. It's hard to even register 0.5 mil on here. It's a very small measurement, so it's a little bit of a wishful drawing thing going on. Let's draw it with this very fine pen here. So what I'll do is I'll just mark it up here, and I can see a slope. That's what I'm aiming for. You can see the difference in the slope, and I'm going to follow it down like that. Could be a tiny bit more on the bass side, actually. Just stretch that out a bit, and then I can mark it off. So I'm taking, as you know, a maximum, by the time I've finished, about 1.5 millimeters off the bass side, and that's going to be a very relatively small amount when all's said and done. Now at the other end, when I come to do the nut, I'm going to be measuring the actual size of the nut rather than measuring and drawing lines on it, because that isn't really feasible. You have to get it right by microscopic measurement. Let's just move a couple of things out the way. Right, so to begin with, I'm going to, now when you do sand something like this, you've got to be careful that two things. We want to be sanding in such a way that we've got to put a bit of emphasis on the base end to take more off that end, because we're doing a bit of a slant, and then we've also got to make sure it stays right angled here. So it's quite a challenging little thing to do. So I do it by, first of all, just pressing harder down on the bass side as I kind of walk from, or sway from side to side, but I'm putting the emphasis on the bass side of it. So I'm starting by cutting down the bass more than anything else. When I start to get close to the line being equal, then I will sort of equalize the pressure, so it's still a bit more needed on the bass side. But it's kind of an experience based thing, and you just keep, every now and then you keep checking to make sure that you're still on a 90-degree thing going on here. Again, if you find yourself running off, you just need to sort of straighten up the saddle a little bit more and then keep on going. Now I'm sort of, hopefully, running both at the same amount now, and we're going well. Now if you're feeling that's going well, you can then switch to the finer sandpaper and just keep the pressure equal all the way along and just keep on going. Stop, look at the amount that you've gone down, look at the angle of the base of the saddle. Now that could do with a tiny lean towards me, but it's hardly any, but you can just feel a little bit of emphasis leaning it towards me a tiny little bit. Now remember, both of these measurements are conservative, okay, so I have got room to go beyond both of these lines, and in fact I will want to go beyond both of these lines really. Now this one's now gone a little bit lean forward, so I've got to straighten this up now. So I get it straightened and then I sort of walk it from side to side until it evens out the base. And I'll be where I need it to be. Okay, it's looking good. I would say we're just about on the mark. So yeah, that old discussion about what practically do we do? Do we go through the neck removal thing, or do we work a bit with the saddle? And I think at the height that the saddle is on here, we're well within the safety margin of working with the saddle. You know, and I always, to test these things out, because I never assume something, I will test it out. And so I've tested it out on my own guitars to see whether there's any appreciable decrease or deterioration in sound, and there isn't. Same way as on my acoustic, I've also fitted an adjustable nut, tusk nut, because the argument that people would have is, oh no, you can't have one of those on an acoustic guitar because it'll stop the tone going from the neck to the whatever people think it does. They believe it goes from the neck. Tone, this magical substance, travels somehow from the neck, where it somehow lives or is generated somehow, and then goes down to the guitar top, through the neck, through the glued joint, and then somehow then it becomes tone or vibrations or something that makes the guitar sound like something. And I have to say, that's not a very plausible hypothesis again, and I just don't do at all well with unsubstantiated hypotheses, and I'm always the kind of person who's going to check them. So I check them by putting them into practice, and actually, interestingly, a lot of people would say on first glance, they would say, I don't want my nut standing on two little grub screws because somehow that will affect the tone of my electric guitar, won't it? And it doesn't. But it can be very difficult to convince someone of that without putting it, in front of them and them allowing you to do it and show you there is no tangible difference. Because those I have to say, those dogmatic beliefs about how things work are very difficult to shift. And I guess it's true for all of us. I'm not saying it isn't. We're all guilty at some point of holding on to somewhat dogmatic views that we feel uncomfortable letting go of. Now I'm going to do a very light sanding on this end, on this side. I don't particularly want it to be much thinner, but I'm hoping to just clean up a little bit of this. Well, it's going to be quite difficult to clean up the old. I don't really think it's nicotine. I think it's what the tusk material does over time. Let's see if I can make it clean up a little bit with naphtha. Thank you. It's kind of ultraviolet, ultraviolet-y effect. I think it's what happens when you have it in sunlight or in daylight for a long number of years. So I don't think we can really make much difference to that, other than scrape that layer off. As I say, though, I'm not really too keen to do that because I don't have any real need for this to be thinner. Sorry, although I can afford it to be a little bit thinner at the top here. I just don't want it thinner too much inside the bulk of the guitar, the bulk of the saddle. So we can kind of clean up a little bit. Like I say, I don't really want to. Nah, it's going to be too hard to do that. We'll live with the colour. Eventually, that other one will go that colour. All right. So now, just I don't know how you can see. So what I'll do is I will now just replace this. I have just a quick little feel of how it sits. I'm wondering if this slot itself has actually been cut at a tilted angle. That's what it kind of looks like. Could be possible depending on how they routed it, or maybe they cut it. It is actually tilted. That's interesting. Well, maybe that's what they want it to be, leaning back instead of going forward. Possible. Anyway, the taller it is, the more it tends to lean, even when you don't want it to. So. Okay, so just, it's always worth doing this, even though I know we're not there yet. But we can replace everything. And remember, when I do changes, I tend to do the one with the biggest amount of adjustment first. And then we'll do calculate the nut finally when we've got the basic playing action where I want it. Okay. It's definitely drilled, routed, going backwards, leaning backwards. Not such a bad thing, especially if it's pulling that way. Okay. Well, it looks like we've actually got down to our 2 mark anyway, which is good. And we're on just under 1.5 there. So that's pretty much spot on. So I went a little bit over. But that was just the difference. Like I say, normally can go quite easily to those levels without needing fret leveling. So about 2 and 1.5 is a safe margin on an acoustic, in my experience. I'll tell you what. What I'll do, I'll tune it up and we'll do another sound sample. Okay, so here we have a low first fret action because we've now lowered the playing action, and we're just the microphone in the same place. Okay, nice. Yeah, okay, yeah, not so bad. I'll measure the action over the first fret just now, and then we'll aim to make our new nut work to that. So I'm quite happy with that action, all strung up. It's still when under tension, I would say that's a fraction over 2. And that is a fraction over 1.5, which is nice. I don't think it needs more than that, but we've got room to do more. There's still about 35 degrees angle on the break angle on the high E, which is loads. So just going to look at the action here and see what we've got on the first fret. Very low. Okay, we're going to want to go up a fraction from that, so let's try 0.2. Say that's about 0.25 on the treble side, so let me just write it down. 0.25 currently, and then on the bass side it's probably a little bit high. Oh no, actually it looks a little bit lower almost. Let's try 1.15. Yeah, about 1.15. So basically, that's not what I want. So having I guess the issue to say here now is, having set a nice new low action, it follows that the action on the first fret now is too low. It's actually not playing badly, but it's too low for my liking. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to remove this nut, and we're going to use it to compare to the new one I've got here in all dimensions. Now, there are those who might say, yes, but it's got a lovely tobacco stained colour. It has, but what I really want is these untouched nut slots. That's what I'm after. Okay, so I'm going to run the risk of nut craziness. No, it only usually goes badly wrong when we're talking about nuts that have been lacquered in on the electric guitars. So look, they kind of begin the same colour, but they eventually go that colour. That could have been some finish. That could have been some, for all I know, that could have some amber, what's the word, satin finish over the top of it, very possibly. Okay, so basically what I need to know is, if I measure this, knowing that it's not quite right at the moment, so let's set it to 0. So on the treble side, on this one, as far as I can measure it, it's measuring 667. Okay, 6.67, and in the slot, as close as I can get into it, on the bass side, usually you can get in further, so it's 606. Okay, so you usually get it lower, to half a mil lower. But that's the readings I'll get in those two positions. Okay, but we know that that one is running at 0.25, and I want 0.4, so that's plus 0.15. So the target is 6.82. This one, I know it's 0.15, so I want to add 25 to it. So it's 6.31 is my target on the bass side in the same place. So that's what I'm aiming for. So I'd start with this, and I look at that and I go, right, to begin with, wow, 8.63. That's a whole 2 millimeters too tall. Now what I can do, if I'm brave, I can go, let's go to 150. I could literally scrape off 150 by using, let's use this again. I could take off 150 by using a file of some kind, or a rasp, put it in the vise and move a lot of stuff fairly quickly. So it's 150 off the, oh, did I say the bass end? Is that the one I did first? I think it was. Let's do 150 off the bass end. Well, that isn't permanent anyway. Hello, 150. So 150 off the bass end. And let's measure the treble end. No. It's 150 off the treble end, silly fellow. Right, 682, and this is, let's go back to this. This measured 863. Right, so that's 220 off. So I said 150 as a, let's go 175 as my start point. Now what I'm obviously aiming to do is to get this down, so I get this to the right height, so I can just place this in the slot without doing any cutting into the slots. Okay, now on the bass side, we need it to measure, in our calculations, we need it to measure 631, and this is 840, so that's 2 out. So we can go 175 again, keep it straight. So, well, basically, it's a straight line, isn't it, Sam? Yes, it is. So let's draw a straight line across the bottom of here. Sorry if the vision's gone bad. Okay, so that gives me a clear start point. What I also just want to check is the width, so that I get this to fit in the slot perfectly well. So on this one, the front to back width is 463, 458, 458. 488 471. So this has got to come in a little bit. We'll do that last because it's only a small amount. I know I've measured this, or I've chosen this nut because the slots line up perfectly. So I'm going to take this to the over here. Sorry you can't see. I'm going to do it with a rasp a little bit, just to kind of move some of this material quicker than any other way. And really just about making sure I can cut it down pretty much flat. And it's never going to be perfect, so I have to leave myself a little bit of a leeway for leaning, so don't overcut it. That'll do. Actually, it's quite a way off. Always too cautious. Okay, I've gone off one side there, never mind. Okay, so let's move things and make sure things are out of the way because we want the sandpaper block back. Now this time I'm going to stay. I'm going to get this down to its correct height in a careful manner, but the first thing I've got to do is get rid of this unevenness. So I'm a bit too tall on the treble side, so I'm going to just basically push down on the treble side only and just bring that into line with the bass side of things. Nearly there. A bit more on the treble side. Damped. Yep. Now I want to straighten this up. Okay, so we look at the treble side, and we've currently got 696, so we're 10 over. On the other side we're 4 over, we're almost there, so a little bit on the treble side still. So let's switch this round and just focus on getting this to its correct place. So a bit more on the treble side and straighten it up at the same time. And a whiff off the bass side. Now we're going straight. So this is running to my 175 mark, which will leave the, I think at the moment, leave the first fret action still a fraction too high, but we'll measure it again. So we're just under there. 626 is okay. Target, and then we're on 694, so the treble side is still a fraction higher. Let's just take that down. So I prefer to do it this way. 669, okay, that's about right now. I prefer to do it this way than to try and do it with cutting the slots, because as I say, that's what I want to avoid at all costs. Okay, so I'm now going to just, I'm not going to place it in there. It's currently, if you remember, too thick, so it's not going to seat in there perfectly well. It shouldn't be a problem, but there is a little bit of a lip at the back that it wants to seat into, so I want to get this down to the right width. So we're getting 460 is about the right width, and this is coming in at 480, I think it was. 473, so it's not a lot different. So my main aim will be to just run it down this flat front face a little bit, until we get close to the thickness. 463, 447, a little bit on here. If you've got to thin it down, always good to go off the flattest face, because that way it will keep the nut consistent shape. .460, 459. Great. On the mark. So we get to clean this up as well in a minute, which would be nice. So this now should fit just inside that little ledge. Obviously it's not glued anywhere, so it's liable to move around just yet. So if it's also just a fraction too fat. There's a tiny bit of leftover gunge in here, which I think I ought to just clean out. Sorry about if the view's disappearing. Yeah, a little bit of glue. So what you really want is get a bit of glue on the front face if you're going to glue anywhere. It's a lot stronger a material, the end of the fingerboard, than is the wood underneath the base. So I would be aiming for that if I had to put glue anywhere. Okay, that's cleaned it up quite a bit. Nicely finished slot on this guitar. If only all the guitars I've been dealing with recently came like that, I would be very happy, but they don't. So I'm just taking the edge off these sharp edges so there's no lip getting in the way, because what I want to do is press it in and have it stand in this, that's it, in the what's the thing it's in the slot. So that makes sure just about that it stands up straight now, whereas before it was not quite seated in there because there's a little bit of a slot formed, even though it's only a shelf in inverted commas. So then I'm going to hold it in the middle and tighten up the innards and outards. Okay, nice baby, nice. Good. Let's get a note. Well, okay, with a couple more chords in each stage of the way. This is now I've lost my metal plectrum. Yeah. So this is now new nut. New nut. New nut. New low action. Wrong chord. Okay, so that is, I think you'll agree, well, your ears should be the judge, but I think as far as I can tell, that's a perfectly great sounding guitar. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to mark up the frets, and we're going to do the fret leveling, which is a rare one for this thing. Now obviously I'll glue in the nut. It's about 1/4 millimeter wide on both sides. I'm not going to worry about that. I may just take a little file to that before I stick it down, but it's a tiny bit. I mean, the problem with tusk, you see, is you have to find the nearest one. They don't make for every single manufacturer, which is okay, but you have to find the right one, the closest one. So you have to work with the overall nut length, the radius, and importantly the E to E spacing, and that will give you a sort of pretty good idea of it. There's a couple, I left a bit of feedback for Strings Direct, who I buy a lot of stuff from now, because in the era of being slightly flooded by fakey things, fake strings, fake everything, I tend to now, I've reverted to buying from a good reputable supplier like Strings Direct. Even if it's a little bit more expensive, I'm going to buy from them now, because I can't afford to risk having fake tusk nuts or fake strings. But on their website, they kind of omitted on a couple of, well, I think 1 or 2 of the nut listings, they omitted the radius, which of course isn't a problem if you're looking for a known model that Graphtec makes for your type of guitar, Yamaha such and such. But if you're doing what I do, which is often less common guitars, you're looking for a matching nut that will work, then it's difficult if they don't put the radius on, because the difference between a 9.5 inch radius and a 12 inch radius is a big deal. I think this is an 18 and 16 and a 12, so it's still not perfectly aligned, but it's better than a poke in the eye. Right, so I'm going to use this one for this business. It's got brand new paper on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do this bit, get this started, get this party started, and then I'm going to whiz out and do a quick bit of spray in. Let's see if I can reach all of these 3 whatchacallaems. Yep. Okay. So the thing here, if you remember, is we've got some wear on these top frets. So it's a matter of, can we eke that out a little bit. Now to do that, of course, we have to do all of the frets. You can't just do some and not the others. So everything's going to get done to clean up those low frets. Sorry, I'm losing my words again. So, people might think, well, that's an expensive way of doing it. Well, yes, it is, but you can't really just choose the ones you want to level, because you'll end up with more or less uneven frets as a result of that. Perfect. Now that showing me there's some relatively low spots in there, but nothing bad. We're a fraction above my usual minimum, so I'm happy that we're comfortably outside of the usual requirement to level fret, so we're sort of leveling as a bit of a luxury here. I am putting a little bit more emphasis on that far end down there, but I'm making sure that I follow on as well on the rest of it. I mean, you'll get the usual sort of things you'll see on an electric guitar. You'll see sort of little dips and so on and so forth. And you have a choice to either kind of dig down and bottom them out, or fine. Yeah, dig down, bottom them out, or leave them and live with the dents. But you know, this is a particular specific request, so I'm going to make sure that I get them out. I'm just going to declog this paper a little bit as we go through. It's fresh on, so I don't want it to get gummed up. Now a tiny bit more curvature, I think. Only the smallest amount. Only the crumbliest, flakiest chocolate tastes like I did a synthesizer instrumental version of that once. I thought it was quite good. Sort of a dance version. You know, you gotta pay due where it's pay your respects where it's due. You know, a good tune is a good tune, even if it's started life as a cheesy bit of advertising. If it's good, it's good. Just check the notes on here. Yeah, so I suppose the answer to any critics going, well, you should have used the patented Faith shimming system to remove the entire neck and recalculate the correct angle required for the dangle, blah de blah de blah, and you go, all right, let Graham be the decider of this. The relatively small amount of time this will take me compared to the other method, and I don't believe there's any tangible difference in the tone or playability. Now I recognise that I don't live with this guitar every day, but Graham's going to be a good judge of it, and what really matters is if when he gets this guitar back he loves how it plays. If he does, then the job is done, and done on a relatively much simpler level than going through removing the neck. It's all going swimmingly. Alright, let's get these two tracks done, as I like to call them, and then we'll be into another coat of trans red, baby. Trans red in the spray room. Yeah, 57 humidity. It's quite amazing. It's gone down since I've been here, but I guess that's in this room. It does drop a bit with me doing stuff, but it's still not as bad out there as the Met Office would have me believe. So I've been gratefully sneaking in some good spraying sessions when I least expected to have them. So I'm very happy about that. So some people might say, when do you know when to stop? On this case, I'm pretty confident that most, if not all, of the notes are going to play well anyway, because we're slightly just above the danger zone. What I'm really doing is I'm just making everything even Stevens for the sake of making sure I remove the wear grooves and keeping everything in line with that, so we don't have any sort of flat spots one side and doesn't extend across. I want it to work all the way across, keep it sort of consistent. we're all there. Yay! Right, so that's the fret leveling done. I can see that it's got rid of all the major, whatever that thing is, grooves, baby. So that's done. Now I'm going to take the strings off for good. And like I said, I could take this saddle down a little fraction now. I have that option if I wanted to be naughty. There is a bit of room. We're still a little higher than my original target. We could do it by a fraction of a mumma. I don't like... Oh, you've done the crime thing, Graham. Graham, you've gone in the sin bin, my friend. You've done the tying knots in these strings, which is guaranteed to cause me physical harm. Never, 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 never do it, mate. Don't do it. I'll show you in the close-up when I come to restring this. Never, never do this horrible thing, because people like me then end up, you're in much greater danger of getting damage to your headstock, because people like me have to dig out these little tangled things. And then we get cut and stabbed, and we ain't happy. I'm only kidding, but we ain't happy. Ow. There goes the nut, as we expected. We'll leave that off for now. Might just take a fraction of a millimetre off the edge of it. Kind of difficult to do, really. The only way you get it really smooth to the flush to the guitar body is doing it while it's on, but then you can't because you hit the finish as well. So you have to sort of, if you do it, you have to do it off the guitar and guess a little bit. And it's a how long is a piece of string moment. Oh, no, bad. No, it's bad. I'm going to use my fret pullers to just loosen these thingies. String what's-its pegs, just to get them going. I'm going to keep them in sequence just in case they have a preference. Sometimes the bottom end of the pegs, oh yeah, one of them split a little bit, but I don't think it's the end of the world. So these can go in the bin. Yuckity yuck yuck. Right. So before I go and grab my last bit of spray fest, and I might have a drink, and so things I want to do. Right, well let's take a fraction off the end of here. Again, very difficult to do in a straight fashion because it's just very unscientific. Do a tiny bit on this end too, just keeping it as straight as I can manage it with my naked eye. Yep. And then we put it on there and we go, can you feel it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? And the answer is no. So you go, right. We could, now we could, it's a funny old one. We could do that thing where, oh god, that's too much bloop. We could wait until we've got the strings ready to go on and use the strings to kind of push everything down. But having done that, I find that ends up, the danger of that is if you get it not in place, you put the strings on and before you know it, it's out of place and it's all gone off in the wrong direction. So I think this will be pretty good, just as is. Make sure it's stuck in the groove. Yes, tonk. Now, we did say at this other end we have a small fraction of room available. Now, this time I'm going to Hey, a bit of late night sunshine, baby. This time I'm going to make the adjustment by measurement at either end. So we'll go from the E slot kind of point here, 690 versus 735. 690 versus 735. And we're going to take down a point. What did we say? We came to point 2. Let's go point 2. So we want to go 690. No, that's not right. Lies. Clear. 685. 665. 710. 665, 710. 665, 710. 665, 665, 710. It's the other way around, isn't it? Its treble is 665, 710. But that's 20 off each, so it should be the same. So we can really only measure one, but we'll measure two just to be on the safe side. So we'll go off the treble, measuring off the treble side. Ready? Down we go. How are you doing? Right, measure off the treble side, which is this one. What did we say? 665, 673. No, hang on. I'm confused now. I think it was higher at the base side, was it? Because we're not working with a slot now. 675, 720. So we've got point 1 to go. Point 1 to go. How are we on straightness? We are straightness itself. Straightness, all good. Let's call it quits. Look at that sunshine, man. Sunshine, man. Okay, what did we say? The treble was up the top end. Oh, I'll tell you what, while we're there, I will, before I put it all together again, I want to do some, that thing is called polishing, but I have to get to the other room and do some spraying. Do you want to come with me to the other room just for a little break? Come on, come with me. Come with me and you'll see. Oh no, I'll get done for that too. Sorry, just putting you down a minute. It's a world of your imagination. If you want to view paradise, simply look around. There's nothing to it. Can I get my thing around my ear still? Oh, blimey. I sort of can. Oink. Yeah, I might hang in there just enough. Come with me, and you'll see in a world of my imagination. Oh, hey, oh, ooh. Hey, how was that nice, or is that nice? Let's put you over here, where presumably you can see a lot of things. What are you looking at down there, right? I put you sort of, oh crikey, sorry. I'm hoping you can see that. I've just got to guess, really. Oh, moth. Now, the problem is I've got to face this way because I need the light. What's happened here? The light's gone wonky. Oh well. Let's try it this way. There's nothing to it. What the world needs now. Oh, it's a different song. Gloves, sweet gloves. Spitty, man. It's the only thing that there's not to cure. Okay, put this back on here, carefully get this back ready to go, slip it in there carefully, bring that up to there. Mega big bite, there we have it. Ta-da. Bin, bin. Oh, sunshine. Oh, sunshine. Oh. Oh. Whew. E. Well, that. Am I covered in? I'm covered in stuff. That can go there. Those can go there. These can go there. Right. So before I take a break, I can recharge a few things while I'm at it. What I'll do, I want to get everything done here on this one tonight. Oh, sorry, you are left filming an empty room, as always. So, things you might want to see. Nut is in place, all good. Let's do the crowning part. So I'm going to paint up the frets again. I'm going to crown them, and then I'm going to clean the fingerboard. Then I'm going to mask the fingerboard off, and then I'm going to sand and polish it all out. And I'll do the sanding polishing off camera so that I can listen to a bit of the radio and have a cup of coffee, or no, can of Coke or something, I don't know. Chill out a bit. And then come back when I'm ready to restring and stuff. So I'm going to use the medium-sized side of things here. So look along the way, would you? There we go. So expect there to be a little bit of work to do on recrowning these, because I've done some leveling work to get rid of the grooves. So you kind of, where you've worked the frets hardest, you have to work the hardest to recrown them. But that's looking good. What you tend to find is the lower frets that you haven't touched with the banana tool much tend to just they whiz through. You're done with those in seconds. What I'll also do with the cameras off recharging is I will give everything a once over with the polish, and I think I'll take the tuners off as well and do the headstock, so it comes, you know, gives a new fresh lease of life. Everything will look sparkly clean. I find that's a small detail that's worth doing, you know, with a headstock, is take off the tuners. It's only a short little detour, but you get to you get to sort of clean the areas under the tuners that you can't do normally, and it always looks like you've gone round them anyway if you don't manage to take them off. So I like to take them off briefly. Do you know, somebody put an ad in our local. No, let's put it another way. I get on great with our local Hermes guy, a chap called Dave. Nice, friendly chap. Always, got time for a quick shoot the shit type of thing. And his wife put up a note in the local Facebooky forum that they're looking for a couple of Hermes drivers or delivery drivers, and it's a sort of fixed amount of volume of parcels per day, and apparently you get your parcels at 10 in the morning, and you as soon as you get them done, you're free. That's your shift done. And it was something like 60 quid per day you can earn. But when you look at that, you've got to have your own car, paying your own petrol, your own insurance, your own phone to obviously be in touch with base and so on. And all of that, and you get 60 quid for the day, and you've got to pay those expenses out of it. And I just thought, my God, that is a hard job for not a lot. Don't get me wrong, I've done things for less money, but not often, I have to say. I've been lucky to be able to use my something or others, my skills and nous to get better pay than that. So I just, take my hat off to people who are prepared to do that to make a living. Okay, last one. There we are, all the frets crowned. Now I'm going to remove the chowners. I never got the right bit to. Oh yeah, maybe I have. Yeah, so that really did seem like a lot of work for not a lot of money. If you're paying your own petrol and car insurance and phone bill and whatever, wear and tear, something else. 60 quid. I mean, by the time you've paid petrol, you're down at what? 20, 30, 40 quid maximum for the day. If you clear that really after your own expenses, that will be. You'd be lucky, I think. And for a day. Okay, I'm really doing this. You can see that we may be able to see that it's quite damaged on the back here, where it's been leaned against a table a million times in its life. Or sorry, leaned against an amp, probably, or a table. So I'm just going to. Because this is a satin finish on the back, there's no real cleaning up to do, so it's mainly for the benefit of cleaning the front. So I'll take the tuners off. I'll just place them in the order they came off. I don't think this is like the world's most critical thing, but it's kind of, you never know. Even if it's down to one operates in a particular sort of way, and you want to keep that in the same place so that the customer recognises the wonky one when they get the guitar back. Things like that, just little details. I don't think, it's very rare that you get them, they actually, the tuners can't really get moulded to a particular string or not. They are just tuners, but just little details like somebody might be used to the stickiness of that one in that position, and then it might just be a bit of a surprise if it moves, apparently. Okay, so after this I'm going to do clean up. I'm going to clean the whole fingerboard with that stuff, naphtha. I'm going to, once I've done that, actually I'm not going to do that until I've done the sand out, so I'll just brush it down for a minute, and then I will clean, give everything a polish off once I've done the sanding. So with the scratch removery stuff, and then I'll put it all together and oil the board and everything. So I'm going to get this all masked off and sand it out, and I shall see you in a little while when it's time to put oil on the fingerboard, put new strings on, and we'll be very near the end of the game at that point. Unfortunately, I don't have a case for this. It came in bubble wrap and stuff, so I'm going to have to carry it. It came in a sort of bit of polystyrene baggy thing, but it's a bit ripped, so I may just have to put it on the front seat and carry it, or put it on the back seat and carry it home gingerly. But hey, yeah, the back is a little bit dinged all over on the back of the neck, like it has been leaned against something lots of times in its life. The only way to fix that really would be to sand it out, or possibly slightly fill it over with something like glue boost, but it would be a lot of work because there's so many little dents. You'd be flooding the whole area really just to clean up these little tiny dents. So I guess Graham's used to it by now because it's familiar to him. But right, so now I've got to switch to the thinner stuff. Anyway, you don't want to see this. I'll see you in a minute. Okay, here we are, polished, frets polished, sanded, tuners, headstock polished, everything done. Oh, the only thing I haven't done is a bit of oiling on the fingerboard. Hold on now. Let's just get you a sort of okayish view. A bit of oil for the board. A bit of an oil cloth. And then we go with strings, and I'm going to give you a close-up of my stringing technique in case you didn't see it on the vintage VSA 500, but it's the same process really, just to ensure that there's enough string on the post, but not so much that it stores up lots of slack and causes problems, and also a method that holds the plain strings really well, so that they don't need the business of tying little knots in them to cut my fingers later down the line. Right, so let's push these strings. So this is the same gauge. This is actually 11. Well, I worked off the low gauge, so this is 11 to 52, I think. Two up on there. There we go. So the secret of these pegs is to get the string in and the ball yanked up, as it were. It's not always easy to do, and it takes a bit of brute force actually at times. So I'll just get this done up. We'll stretch the strings out and then give it a little test play for an audio sample so I can make a comparison, and then we're off home. I think tomorrow I'm off, so I've got everything, well, I've got these guitars done up front, which is great. Tomorrow we've got our granddaughter coming down, stepdaughter and partner and granddaughter, so a bit of family time. Get down there, come on, that's it, that's it. Right, down this end, and let's have a closer look. Okay, the secret. First of all, line up all your tuners with the holes pointing at you. Just makes everything a bit easier. string through, all the way taut, pull back 1 fret, start winding, hold the string, put the tight string over the loose string, and as it comes round, bend it under itself and under the loose string and pull the loose string up, and then you've got a kind of locking thing, and push your blasted peg back down. So that's the first one. Show it again. String in all the way through, pull back 1 fret, hold on tight, hold it above the loose one goes under the tight one, direct the tight one under the loose one on the way round, pull the loose one up, keep the tight one low down or lower down. There it is. So this minimises the amount of slack on the pegs. Pull back 1 fret. And then the left-handed side of it, you have to kind of swap over a little bit. Same principle though. All the way through. Pull back 1. Hold it there with the thumb. Wind it on. Wind it on. Lift the held string over the loose one on the first time. Push it down as it comes round. Yank the loose one up and send the held one under the loose one. Get it round the right way. So all the time I'm keeping it under tension with my hand, because that's the sort of tricky bit. Otherwise it likes to come undone and boing out. Pull back the whole fret. Hold it over the loose one as it comes round under the loose one. And finally, some people don't like the sound of new strings. They find them too twangy. So again, that will change how this little test sample audio sounds really. And it's not a great recording because it's coming through this wireless mic, which does put a different sort of particular tone onto it. It's not a great ambient all-round mic. It's good for voices, but that's what it's meant for. Okay, chop chop. So now you can cut right close to everything and nobody gets their fingers spiked. Nobody gets their fingers spiked having to undo a knot later on. Hurrah. Da, 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 da. So at this point I tend to give everything a sort of test pull, make sure nothing is going to spring out on me. Push anything in that's coming up. Oop, like that. No. There it is. Thank you. Okay, so what you want to do at this point to make sure your tuning is as good as it can possibly be, are we zoomed out here? I guess no, now we are. As good as it can be, get your hands, fingers and thumbs and squeeze the strings between fingers and thumbs and give them a good squeeze. And that will stretch out some more of the slack, and we'll see how much that detunes them. See where we get to. So the tuning stability, as I said on the previous video, the vintage VSA 500 video, tuning stability is all down to the nut. 50% the nut, 50% nut, 50% slack in the strings. Trouble is, you touch a bleeding freshly polished guitar like this, everywhere you touch it, it gets mucky. Literally can't. I've got crap all over my arms. Anyway, let me just do something. It doesn't help. Come here, cloth. What time is it now? This must be close to 9. I think I may have lost my last spraying option window, but that's fine because I've got a fair few coats of red on, so I don't really mind. I seem to have picked up a load of grime from the fret dust. Okay, so again, we'll get the strings and we'll stretch them all through one more time and do a bit more pulling and tugging, and we really advise you to do this until it stops detuning. That's what you want to do, and then you'll be able to just pick it up out of its box or off the wall and play it anytime you want, and it will pretty much, if it's not perfectly in tune, it will go into tune really quickly and easily. You won't have any of that struggle that we sometimes get with bad nuts and bad slack, baby. Nearly there. Okay, let's have a quick listen on the sound department, see what you think, because then we are done. It's ready. I shall go and rescue my paint job from the other room, hang it up, and we'll be away. So a couple of chords from the final cut once again. Same microphone, same basic setup. There we have it, ladies and good people, gentlemen, and that's the Faith thing, which isn't probably Venus. The Faith Mars Sunburst, Mars Sunburst. Done, dusted. Now, you know, we'll see how it strikes Graham to play this guitar, and I'll just do a quick close-up on the back here to show you the amount of break angle we've still got going on. So nobody could be upset about the break angle there. That is more than plenty enough to be working with, and we've got a lovely low action out of it, as you can see. Beautiful new friction-free nut doing its biz, and everything working just fine. So there you go. I would rather do that than that, if that's okay with you. Focus, gosh darn it, that. Anyway, all right, so listen, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See you again soon in next week. I've got loads on. Can't think, what guitars have I got? Loads. See you next week anyway. Hope you enjoyed it. Bye. Remember that one, that's Final Cut, Pink Floyd song. There we have it, ladies and good people, gentlemen, and